There you go. I'm John Kane, and this is Resistance Radio. I want to thank you for listening, for tuning in, however you're doing it, whether you're listening online, whether you're listening in New York City on WBAI. Of course, we rebroadcast this show in Washington, D.C., so if you're listening on WPFW, however you're listening, I greatly appreciate you giving me your time. Hey, we're going to do some calls today, so let me start right out by putting out the studio line, so you have it, and I'll let you know when we're pulling you guys in, and the number is 212-209-2877, unless I got that completely wrong, which I'm sure Reggie will correct me. So, got some stuff to talk about this week. The governor of the state of New York came to Seneca Nation this week. Never happened before in the history of the United States and New York State. There's never been the governor of the state of New York that's come to Seneca territory. So kind of a historic thing. But of course, the tensions between the Seneca Nation and New York State have probably never been as bad as they are with this governor. The current president has taken a hardline position, at least when he was campaigning anyway, about no longer providing a revenue-sharing clause in their gaming compact, which expired a year and a half ago and has not been renegotiated yet. And I gotta say, there has not been. This was the first time there was a face-to-face meeting between the president of Seneca Nation and the governor of the state of New York. And all this time, it hadn't happened. So it says something for what the visit was really all about, I guess. And in case you're wondering, we once again got an apology. Yeah, we got an apology. So Kathy Hochul came out to Seneca Nation to apologize for the state's role in the Thomas Indian School, which is not it wasn't a federally funded residential school, but it was a state-funded residential school. And it was funded for almost 80 years, 70 or 80 years. Now, it was closed down almost 70 years ago or so. So you've got the current governor apologizing for something somebody else did, basically, and it was, pitched as a gesture of goodwill, one that is supposed to be trying to improve the relationship between the state of New York and the Seneca Nation. But it comes on, a recent history that's not very, not very friendly. And I've got to tell you, I'll just go over it real quickly. About 3 years ago, the state of New York has been fighting the Seneca Nation over gaming revenue. Now, because we are too incompetent to run our own gaming facilities, the federal government passed a law that requires that native gaming enterprises have to enter into a compact with the states that they're located in. We can argue whether we are really in New York State, but that's another discussion. So, in order for the Seneca Nation to pursue Class 3 gaming, which is casino gaming, they had to enter into a gaming compact with the state of New York. Now, there's nothing in the federal law, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, that says we have to pay anything to the state of New York. In fact, it says just the opposite. It says that the whole intent of the law is to ensure that the Seneca Nation, or whatever gaming nation it is the primary beneficiary of the gaming. That's a difficult task, and we can get into that probably in another discussion. But so that's what the intent of the law was, to ensure that the Seneca Nation would be the primary beneficiary of its own gaming. But what also got folded in this thing was an opportunity for states to offer something of value in exchange for a kind gesture from the gaming nations, in this case the Seneca Nation, to share some of its revenue. But that had some stipulations to it. As far as the Interior Department was concerned, the only way that this could happen and not be framed or really be classified as a tax or a forced payment was that the state of New York had to give something of value. So what the state claims they were giving was some level of exclusivity for for gaming, especially as it related to slot machines and Class 3 gaming machines in all of Western New York, the 15 counties in all of Western New York. See, now the problem is the state didn't really give that up because they couldn't do it anyway. So the argument is, did the state give anything up for a percentage of revenue sharing? And what was that percentage, by the way? Well, it started out as 18%, then 22%, and then 25% of the net slot drop, which is essentially the gross gaming revenue. All right, so what does that mean? It meant 50% of the take. I mean, by the time the Seneca Nation paid for all of its expenses out of its share, the 75% of the net slot drop, the gross gaming revenue, the state was getting as much as the Senecas were. And this gaming compact was negotiated for 21 years. But the language of the compact only had the Senecas paying for 2 years at 18%, 5 years at 22%, and then 7 years at 25% of the net slot drop. There was no language in the last 7 years. In fact, the last 7 years was considered a renewal period that would be automatically renewed once those first 14 years had expired. And there was no language about the renewal period having any payment. So there were some conflicts between the Seneca Nation and the state of New York even during that first 14 years. In fact, the Senecas withheld payment for a period of time because, as far as they were concerned, the state had violated the agreement by competing directly against them by putting up slot parlors in all of the racetracks, 3 of which were in the so-called exclusivity zone. So the Seneca stopped paying, and it turned into a point of contention. Never went into binding arbitration, though. So the state said, name a settlement price. And the president at the time basically said, well, we'll settle this dispute for now by keeping $200 million of what we have put in escrow pending the resolution of this conflict. So the state basically admitted that they were wrong to the tune of $200 million, and the Senecas then continued to pay. At still a ridiculous rate, considering they didn't really have exclusivity, but that's another discussion, I guess. Part of the reason the Senecas agreed to pay was to kind of smooth it over so the renewal period would happen without a hitch, and this would actually start in 2016, the renewal period. So it would run for another 7 years to 2023. Because the Senecas understood that, as far as the compact was concerned, there was no more payments after that. So we'll just continue to pay an exorbitant amount, I might add, because we're not going to pay for the last 7 years. So when 2016 we passed 2016, which, by the way, is when the state of New York started operating its own Class 3 casinos, not just the Class 2, not just the slot parlors at the racetracks, but they got into full-blown casino gaming. But by then the Seneca said, well, we're not paying you anymore. And that's the way, that's the position the Seneca Nation took. The state said, oh, hell no. You got to keep paying us. You got to keep paying us because it may not say it in the compact, but we know that's what it meant. So the state's whole position was that there was some sort of implicit agreement to keep paying for that last 7 years. The Seneca Nation said, wait, there's no such thing as implicit in a contract. In fact, the four corners doctrine of contract law says whatever in there has to be in there. It has to be explicit, not implicit. You can't say, well, it was implied. We thought you knew you had to pay. We didn't have to actually say it. Well, and the Seneca Nation position was, no, that's not the way contract law works. There's also this other thing called the canons of construction, where even the Supreme Court says, look, states, federal government, if you negotiate a treaty or contract with Native people and there's any ambiguity, we're saying it must be interpreted through the eyes of the Native people. Because you guys have all this wordsmithing skill set that Native people may or may not have. So it's on you to make sure that the language of any agreement you have with Native people is not ambiguous. And if it is, we're going to interpret it through the eyes of Native people. So that's the foundation of this thing. But this time the state says, we're going into arbitration, which was binding arbitration. Now, the way this worked out with the Seneca Nation is that they got to name one of the judges. It was a three panel judge. They got to name one of the judges. The state got to name one of the judges, and then those two judges would agree upon the third, I guess, is the way it worked out. So when all said and done, you got two white guys and one native guy. The native guy was a guy by the name of Kevin Washburn, who had, I think he even served for a period as the assistant secretary of the Interior Department. He's the guy who knew the Interior Department, he knew gaming, and he was a lawyer. He was a very accomplished native lawyer. Chickasaw he was, by the way. So it was pretty clear. And look, I had law scholars on my show to talk about this, and they all said, we don't see how the state prevails here, because the language is pretty clear that it's not there in the compact. It's not there. But these two white guys on this arbitration panel said, yeah, we know it's not there, but we think it should have been, and that was supposed to be. And this was a mistake by the state of New York, and we're ruling for the state that the Senecas still have to pay. Now, by now, the Senecas have had money set aside just in case, and we're talking about $500 million. But here's the thing: the native judge, he said, these two other guys, they just rewrote the compact, so we no longer have an agreement anymore. So even though it's binding arbitration and it wasn't supposed to be able to be challenged in court, the Senecas tried and failed. The court said, no, you agreed to binding arbitration. Well, here's the problem. We aren't talking about a standard disagreement here. We're talking about a rewrite of law. We're talking about a rewrite of a contract. We're talking about a misinterpretation of any legal standards for contract law. So Kevin Washburn said, yeah, these guys rewrote the compact. And he even suggested that it probably need to be reapproved by the Interior Department. Keep in mind that when these compacts are entered into, the Interior Department has to approve them. They can approve them a couple of different ways, by the way. They can approve it, or they can remain silent, which after a period of time is the same thing as approving it. So now you have this conflict, right? And so the Seneca's position is, all right, yeah, we lost in binding arbitration. We had two white guys dance well outside the confines of law to rule in favor of the state, but we still have a problem. We don't think that we can make this payment without authorization from the Interior Department. We think we might be breaking our own laws or the federal law by making this payment without an approval from the Interior Department. Got a native person in the Interior Department. Shouldn't be hard to get her involved in this thing, but she wouldn't. She remained silent. So we had this period of time where the state had their ruling in their favor. The Senecas had over $560 million in an escrow account, and they were basically waiting for the Interior Department to say, yeah, there's nothing we can do, you got to pay it, or no, we've got to revisit this whole thing now, because now you don't have an agreement between two parties. You have a forced payment coming from the state of New York and two judges, two white guys who sat on this arbitration panel. That's what you have. But Deb Haaland wouldn't say anything. So what ends up happening is that Kathy Hochul, who is the governor of the state of New York at the time, and current governor, loses her patience. She's trying to spin a deal here, not just which is bigger than the Seneca Nation's payment. She's trying to use the bulk of that money, because out of that money, the state gets to keep about a little over $400 million of it, and the rest of it was supposed to go back to the municipalities, where the Seneca's gaming sites are located near. So Kathy Hochul had a plan. She was going to take $400 million of that money, couple it with another $400 million from the state from the state coffers, and give it to the billionaire, the local billionaire. Now, Kathy Hochul is from this area. She's from Hamburg, which is only about a half hour, maybe 30 minutes from here. And that's kind of where the Buffalo Bills play football, in that general area. So she wants to give $800 million plus to the local billionaire who owns the Buffalo Bills to build a new stadium, half of which is coming from the Seneca Nation. So she can't have this thing languishing in, waiting for the Interior Department. So She freezes the Seneca Nation's bank accounts, all of them. All of the bank accounts, the operational accounts, everything from payroll, not just for the gaming stuff, but for the operation of the Seneca Nation. She froze all of their bank accounts. She used some law that says, well, if you've been assessed a fine, so she treated revenue sharing like it was a fine. It gives you an idea how what the mentality was. She used this law that says you can freeze a somebody who is due a fine to the state. You can freeze their accounts to force them to pay. So she didn't just like sweep the escrow account. She froze all of the operation accounts. Basically held the nation hostage, extorted that $564 million out of the Seneca Nation. So she did this on a Friday. By Monday, the Senecas capitulated and relented and gave the money up. They didn't really have a choice. They had checks that were already starting to bounce. So the Senecas relented. And the Seneca people were pissed. And they still are. And it's one of the main reasons that, in spite of everything else, they just don't want to pay the state of New York anything. J.C. Seneca, the current president of Seneca, he ran on that platform that he would no longer have revenue sharing. So all this nicety, that transpired this week, inviting the governor out, asking her to issue a formal apology for the Thomas Indian School. Yeah, I know it rings a little bit. It's got echoes of Joe Biden going to Arizona, and I'll talk about that for a little bit here in a minute too. So that's what she did. She came out here. So how did the survivors, how did some of the alumni, if you want to call them that, from the Thomas Indian School feel about it? None of them felt satisfied. None of them felt like her apology meant anything to them. They all said that it was political. This was just a political stunt. Now, the Seneca Nation officials, J.C. Seneca and some of the counselors, they try to say, "Oh no, this isn't political. This is about the state finally admitting that they were wrong." Yeah, but this is the current governor apologizing for what the state did 70, between 100 and 70 years ago. It rings hollow, and especially when you understand that she's apologizing for what somebody else did. But she's still not addressing the fact that she essentially extorted $500 million out of the Seneca Nation. So it didn't go very smoothly. If you looked at the comments that were all over social media, I think it was like, over 70% of the comments were negative. Only a handful of comments praised the governor's actions, and they weren't the survivors of the Thomas Indian School. So, it begs the question is, what are these apologies for? Who are they for? Well, I'll tell you who they're for. They're for the apologists. When Joe Biden went down to Arizona, he went down to Arizona and apologized for residential schools generally, the national policy of residential schools, because he was trying to get votes for Kamala Harris. They already kind of screwed up the entire Democratic platform on the presidential run, between him staying in the race too long, Harris never really going through any primary process, and not necessarily being that popular in the first place. When she did run prior to this election, she in the primary, she was one of the early ones out. Not exactly a great vote getter. So Biden goes down to Arizona, a swing state, thinks he's going to appeal to liberals because he's doing this wonderfully gracious thing, apologizing for residential schools. And maybe he thought the native vote was going to come out. It didn't. Harris lost. So it was a failed political stunt. Arguably, that is exactly what Kathy Hochul is trying to do. Her poll numbers are dreadful. She doesn't look very good heading into whatever the next election cycle is going to be. There may be a Republican governor again. There hasn't been a Republican governor since George Pataki. Most people don't. Wait, Pataki, that sounds familiar. Do I know that name? No, most people don't. But he was a multiple-term governor of the state of New York. But that seems like a lifetime ago, and it kind of was by most standards, I guess. So she's in rough shape. She's also trying to gently squeeze the Seneca Nation for revenue sharing, and she's trying to squeeze a guy who ran for the presidency of the Seneca Nation, J.C. Seneca, who out of the gate said he wasn't going to. So I don't know where that sits, but it didn't go well. But I got to say, this is kind of the history of the United States. Bill Clinton, he apologized for the illegal occupation and the takeover of Hawaii. Didn't give Hawaii back. No, didn't do that. Hawaii still was overtaken, illegally occupied, and illegally, quote unquote, annexed. It wasn't really annexed, but just taken by the United States while the rest of the world, sat quiet. Now we got, the president of the United States, in last fall apologizing for residential schools. Nothing else done. Nothing else being done. And now you got the governor of the state of New York apologizing. And all she's saying that she's going to make a commitment to ensure that residential schools are included in the history curriculum in New York State. Really? That's what you're going to do? That's not very impactful. That's not very impactful. Because let's face it, it's mostly you folks that we're a small minority of people. You're not doing anything positive for us. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I pushed for the ban on the mascot issue. Kathy Hochul had nothing to do with it. She had nothing to do with it. And I'd never even heard a comment come from her. Maybe she had commented publicly on it, but I did this through the Department of Education, through Dr. Betty Rosa, the commissioner of New York State Education Department, through the Board of Regents. That's how that ban. It had nothing to do with Hochul. Just wanted to throw that out there. So the question becomes, and this is where I'm queuing up my buddy Reggie. The question becomes, is saying sorry enough? Go ahead, Reg. Let's do a little Murray Porter.
Now you say you're sorry. It's not what you say, it's what you do. Tell us you'll do better, but it's hard to believe in you. The day has finally come. Told the world that you were wrong. Far too many have passed on now. When it's sorry, you took away our children. Separated from our culture, so many years, so alone, with no mothers and no fathers, in a world so far from home. Forced to use another language, punished well, you spoke your native tongue. Tried to kill our spirit here, but our hearts still beat as one. is not what our mothers took away our children, stole our mother's love, laid waste to our traditions. Wasn't that enough? Well, will it be enough? Yeah, yeah. When is sorry enough? Hey.
All right, that's Murray Porter. Most of you know that I'm a Murray Porter fan. He's Mohawk from Six Nations or Grand River on the Canadian side. He wrote that song after Canada had issued its apology. And of course, we've had, so the Prime Minister of Canada issued an apology. We've had the Pope issue an apology. We've had people travel to the Vatican and be apologized to and say, I'm sorry, pray for me, and all that stuff. But none of that addresses the harm that was really done. Yeah, on the Canadian side, they actually even cut a few checks. If you filed within a certain period of time, you can get a check sent to you, and that was supposed to make it all better. The problem is we still have conditions. I talk about it all the time. We have these racist doctrines that hang over us: doctrine of Christian discovery, the trust doctrine, the plenary powers doctrine. These things still exist, and they still cast us as something less than the rest of society. And so this is going to continue to be a problem. So. Great work from Murray Porter. Murray does my opening, the I Don't Know More opening, and it's the drum solos that I go out on is also from Murray's music. And this is Sorry Enough from Murray Porter. He won a Juno Award for the album, the song "Living Life Played." By the way, that's the Canadian equivalent of a Grammy. So, all right, hey, we are listener supported radio. We broadcast this show primarily on WBAI in New York City and on WPFW in Washington, D.C. The last couple of weeks, I did two shows. I did a live show for each station. Now this one will air in both. This show will air in both on both stations. We are listener-supported radio. We count on your contributions. I ask you to make a contribution to these fine radio stations. You can, and of course, if you do it in the name of Resistance Radio, that's great. The main thing is to make sure that these radio stations stay on the air. There's no guarantees. Look, we don't get corporate. We don't have corporate underwriting. We don't have any government funding that comes our way. This is truly listener-supported radio. When we call ourselves independent free speech radio, we're independent because it's you. It's almost solely you, the listeners, that keep us on the air. So there's a lot riding on your support for the shows, for the programming, for the stations. So let me go through it a little bit. If you are listening on WBAI, I ask that you either go online to buddy.wbai, follow the prompts. You can become a buddy. You can be a BAI buddy, or you make a one-time donation or a time donation, and you can do that, again, do it all online, safely and securely online. Or you can call 1-833-WBAI-NYC, or that's 1-833-922-4692, and you can donate there by credit card. Look, you can also send donations directly to the station, the old way, but we know most people are trying to do this stuff in the most convenient way possible. So, again, you call that number. Look, if you, for whatever reason, if you get an answering machine or a voicemail, just leave your name and your number, and we'll get right back to you. So that's for donating to WBAI. If you are listening in Washington D.C., I ask that you support WPFW. You can go online to www.wpfwfm.org. Again, follow the donation prompts. Do whatever suits you. But please do something. You can go on. You can also call. You can call 202-588-9739 or our 800 number, toll free number, 1-800-222-9739. And again, provide the information, and we'll look. We greatly appreciate it, but we more than appreciate it. We depend on it. We count on you, the listening audience, to this show, to all the programming, to keep us on the air. So I wanted to say that. All right, I want to spend the remainder of the show taking some calls. I've had plenty to say about apologies, and I'm not going to make any, but I'm going to ask you to call in, be a part of the program, and you can discuss Hochul's visit. You can discuss anything you want. If you've got a question that you want a native respondent to, then by all means, make the call. The number is 212-209-2877. That's the studio line. That's the number to call to be on Resistance Radio with John Kane. What do we got, Reg? Do we have anybody holding on line yet?
Oh, not yet. I mean, you just announced the number. Give it about a minute or two.
I'm just saying, I know that there was some.
They're going to respond.
I posted it on Facebook ahead of time, so I thought maybe somebody wrote the number down and called a little early.
Oh, people won't react until you say something.
All right. Maybe I'm being a little too optimistic, I guess. But again, I do want to hear from you, the listeners. You guys oftentimes will ask me something maybe a little out of the box, and if I can accommodate your question with I think an adequate answer, or maybe a less than adequate answer, I don't know. By all means, give me a call. Reggie, I got one other thing I wanted to say. I got to ask the question: would anybody accept Israel issuing an apology to what they've done to Gaza and the Palestinians? I mean, think about the absurdity of it. And maybe when you think about it from a native perspective or from what was done to us, it doesn't really grab you. But look, all the Gaza stuff, all the Palestinian stuff is, West Bank, the Golan Heights, all of it. It's so much in the news. We know what atrocities look like in real time because of what has transpired there. So if Netanyahu just decides when he's done, whenever that is, or done enough, that he's going to issue an apology, or that the President of the United States will issue an apology for the role the United States has played in the destruction and the decimation of Gaza, would that even be fathomable as a reasonable response, an apology?
You asking me that question?
I'm just putting it out there, but by all means, give me your thoughts on the value of apologies in the face of atrocities. Please do, Reg. Please, I'm asking you.
Well, to answer your question, John, I would say that it would be disgustingly too little, too late. And I the thing is that I'm not saying that you should just go full out, massacre people. I'm not saying that, but no, it's going to settle for a while. And an apology, just like what Murray Porter said, is sorry enough? Really? I don't think so. I mean, that's my opinion, though.
Ask any Hawaiian, right? Ask any Hawaiian how they feel about Bill Clinton's apology from back in 1993. I remember when he did it. And let me tell you something. Here's the value of an apology. There was a period of time when there were some folks in Hawaii who wanted to use that apology as grounds for a land dispute, filing some sort of land claim in court. And the court said no. That apology was a joint resolution of Congress. It has no force of law. You cannot use a government's apology. See, this wasn't just Bill Clinton. This was Congress. This was a joint resolution of Congress. Overwhelmingly supported. But see, a joint resolution of Congress is not a law. It is,
Right.
it's like Smokey Bear and naming the Gulf of America or something. Actually, that didn't even happen. That was the president. I think I can't even take that one back. But no, this is, I mean, so when the Hawaiians tried to use an admission of guilt from the United States as part of of evidence in a court of law, the court said, "Nah, can't do it. That it has no force of law, has no value in this court." And of course, that's what they get to pick and choose. They get to pick and choose. Well, what is proper evidence? And apparently,
Yeah.
admitting you were wrong, apologizing, calling it a sin or whatever, is not the same thing as really any kind of legal capitulation. I mean, you just got to put that out there. Again, let me
Yeah.
give the number one more time. The number is 212-209-2877. I know some of you are listening, and unfortunately, because we rebroadcast this in Washington, the folks in Washington, by the time you hear the program, you can't really call it. But I did let people know, look, this show does stream live on the WBAI website. I put it up as a podcast. I actually do record a video of it, and I post it up. Of course, none of that helps you if you're if you're listening after the broadcast to phone in. But
John,
yes.
we do have callers ready.
All right. Well, then I'll stop rambling on and filling in time for the callers. All right, caller, you're up first. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Yes, indeed. This is my ad calling from the Jessica B. Fletcher Cove, if you will. Critical thinking, right thinking versus wrong thinking et al. I have I have two comments. Please let me finish. You can take it to the bank via my pro bono project, the 21 PR Angel. I want to let you know that if you want to have fruitful donations, which you were making that point earlier, is absolutely necessary in these fascist times, you cannot or should not hang up on people abruptly. Okay, one program did that to me. I don't even listen, and I certainly no longer contribute. So what I'm saying to you is that these are perilous times. Okay, give people 30 or 45 seconds. Usually their last point is their main point, or they want to cap up what their comment is. This program used to be called Talk Back. Okay, so you don't often take calls, but we do appreciate it because that's my favorite part of many, many programs. And as to a sword of Damocles over the station, you hear that 2-1 on Mondays at 3 p.m. That is someone that took it from a card, is violating the bylaws because you can't promote a private entity, and certainly you have to be civilized enough not to plagiarize. Thank you so much. Nature, the Most High, good order design, bless WBAI.
All righty then. I was kind of hoping that somebody would participate in the program, not just use it as a for that purpose.
We do have more callers, John.
All right. Well, let's see if we can do better the next time. I guess thank you, Mayad, for that. But let's move on. All right, caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi. I think I'm number 2. Sorry.
No, you're
Veronica.
Yeah, go ahead, Veronica. I appreciate the call.
I love your show.
Thanks.
I love it. I always sit here and I'm arguing with you, and then I'm taking notes, okay? So calm down. Number 2, if you're looking for an apology from Israel, dream. Pigs can fly. And number 3, I got a little bit of money from an accident, and I went to a broker, and I said, I would like to do some investment into one of the sovereign nations, native nations, because I'm like 9th generation down the line from Seneca.
Okay.
She looked at me like I had 7 heads, and she said, oh, well, you would do better to make donations. And I said, no, I would like to know if it's possible to do any investments, because I see that quite a few nations got their stuff together, and they're working on the system of making money. She couldn't give me anything. Now, number 1, I want your opinion on that. Number 2, I would like to know if there is some way that I can start investing in one of the nations, preferably Seneca. That's my family tradition. Am I making sense to you?
Yeah, and in fact, there was a period of time where again, the controls that the federal government has on everything is kind of
Yeah.
Oppressive. But there was a period of time where there nations could issue tax-free bonds to raise money for certain things, as long as it wasn't gaming. I guess that was the one prohibition for whatever reason. So, the one thing that they could do that would be significant in terms of developing a business, the tax-free bonds were prohibited. I don't know how many. I don't know if the Seneca Nation ever did any of those. That's a good question, though. I'll have to pursue that a little bit and see if there are any things in place here in Seneca territory. As you know, I broadcast from the Seneca Nation territory of Cattaraugus. Perhaps
Right.
there are
I
some
know.
things that they have in place. I don't know if they have any open tax-free bond issued right now, but I could find that out and let you know.
Yeah, I appreciate that because the answer I got was completely insufficient to me.
Yeah, well, and if the Senecas aren't, perhaps somebody else is, and again, we
Yeah.
are kind of in this boat together. We don't always
Just a
appear.
question. Any suggestions on me how to research that? I know Standing Rock was standing up to Christian beautifully, but I would just like to put some. Just come on, man. It's about investing in all of our futures. All right, and
Well, I'll see what I can find out. I will say that there are certainly projects that that frankly I've been
that would
involved
make me
in
happy.
that
That would make me very happy.
that would require some investment. I mean, in fact, I'm just finishing up a documentary. I'm not saying that these are going to have great returns on them because they're, but it's the kind of thing that if you wanted to invest in the people to better themselves, there may be projects like that. I'm sure your broker thought you were crazy because there's probably not a whole lot of great returns on native investment, but I know people do it for multiple reasons, right?
I'm not really. There are one or two things I'm really not worrying about great returns. I want to vote. I want to do something for conscience.
I see.
Like I asked about Ireland because that's part of the heritage, and she said, no, Ireland doesn't have any bonds up at all right now. They're holding things close to the chest because of all of the tariff actions, and I understand. But she said there wouldn't be any money, and I said, no, that's not the point. You never know what your future holds, and you got to invest. You want to invest where your conscience is, and I have a conscience regarding ancestry and history.
Well, let me see what I can find out, and I'll do a mention of it on the show, and maybe I'll post some stuff on social media as well. I appreciate the call, and I appreciate your intentions, and let's see if we can't make something happen. Okay. All right. Let's go next caller. Caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Nick from Parsippany.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for calling in. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, I love your show, but apologies. What else do you expect? But it may be all or nothing at all. And what I mean by that is we're in this fascist era now of capitalism, and the objective is to erase history. And there's been this movement around for quite some time now, and it's called No Apology, the No Apology movement. And it was one element was with hunters. And when you kill an animal, you don't say a prayer. You don't apologize to the animal. And I know in the native culture, in the history, if you offended anything or broke a taboo, you would apologize, and you can get your spirit right. But in capitalism, when these offenses, they say, I apologize, but there's no money, no compensation, no, it's just rhetoric. It's just like manners, until the lights go out, and
well,
then, and then all the demons come out. But what you do and why you're great is you keep history alive. And I still say you should have a special show and talk about what happened with the Kansua Dam, how the Seneca were betrayed, and how their lands were taken in the 1950s. I'm 75 years old, and I remember some of that stuff. And, how just your people are disenfranchised all the time. And now with Hochul. So, like, apology is all you're going to get, unfortunately, and it's it's meaningless. It's words,
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because
just keep up the good work.
even in the Kinzua Dam project, the Seneca Nation kind of got an apology from John Kennedy because Kennedy threw the Senecas under a bus. I mean, it was so important that Kennedy win Pennsylvania against Nixon that he endorsed the Kinzua Dam project, which was, for those who aren't familiar, it was a major dam project that was intended to solve some of the flooding problems to Pittsburgh. And when they assessed what projects were going to best handle that, the Kinzua Dam project wasn't even the best project, but it had the lowest political impact, bottom line. Because if you flooded out 10,000 acres or condemned 10,000 acres of Seneca land, they weren't a big voting bloc anyway. They weren't going to impact anybody politically, and it's not like you were displacing white folks. So John Kennedy actually wrote a letter. It actually sits in the museum. He addressed this issue with the Seneca Nation and essentially apologized for what he did to them. And of course, that apology didn't mean a whole lot. And again, when you get these Democrats they're oftentimes praised for having a little bit more of a conscience and a little more human rights or civil rights orientation, you realize that it's just a calculation. So I mean, so I'm not a big fan of apologies. I think they are meaningless. They are admissions of guilt, perhaps a little bit, especially at least in Kennedy's situation. He was apologizing for what he did, not for what took place 100 years prior. So I don't know. And I'm certainly not looking for an apology out of Israel for Gaza. I'm just saying, if you think that's an absurd proposition, which I do, then I think you have to understand how absurd some of these apologies are too. But I will say, I believe that there are some things that can be done. And look, we're pushing to get land returned to us. We're trying to eradicate these racist legal doctrines that exist. You want to do something positive? Stop claiming that we're wards of the federal government. You want to do something positive? Stop claiming your Congress was granted through the Constitution plenary powers over every aspect of our lives, because it's not true. So if you want to fix some things, there are some things that need to be fixed. Our autonomy and our land restoration are important to us. So those are the things that we're looking for. We want restoration, not reconciliation. So having said that, let's go on to the next caller, I guess. Caller, you're up next. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hello, hi. My name is Jacob, and I'm coming from Paterson, New Jersey.
Hey, Jacob. Thanks for calling in.
Say, first off, yeah, this is my first time hearing you guys because my Bluetooth transmitter picked you guys up, and I just want to say it's been great to hear you guys talk. I didn't know things like this existed. I just really want to bank off of what was going on here. So I feel like personally, I feel like we are going to get an apology from Israel and America, but I feel like when that happens, it's just going to get brushed over, and no one's going to care about it in a week or two. The same thing with the LA fires and the Hawaiian fires. Like, everyone's going to care about it for like a week, and then the media comes up and picks it up with a new story. Like, oh, Donald Trump is doing this now, or Joe Biden has this, or whatever they're going to do. I feel like we are going to get an apology, and anyone with a consciousness is going to be like, yo, this doesn't mean anything. But at the end of the day, they have roles to play, and they have to keep people under control. So they got to play the part. You guys already know how it goes. But yeah, I just feel like that. What do you guys think?
No, I honestly, what I would expect though is it won't be Netanyahu, it won't be Donald Trump. It'll be future administrations that will, do these kind of blanket apologies for the actions of previous administrations. Which again, if it doesn't come with any real meaningful action, it's meaningless.
I don't think anyone from any administration apologized of the wildfires that happened in Maui. I don't think any administration apologized over the horrific thing that happened in East Palestine, Ohio, or the hurricane that happened last year. I haven't heard any apologies over there.
No, but you'll hear remorse. Exactly. I mean, you'll as Jacob said, you'll hear remorse over it. So
yeah, I feel like they'll give a little, like you said, remorse is to have that connection with people, just everyday people. But at the end of the day, they'll have to like clean up their mess that they created and spin a new story or push a new agenda, so everyone could just forget about it and move on.
Yeah, no, I agree with I agree with you 100%. I think people
Yeah,
do
well,
try
that
to
I
they try to
agree,
frame
yeah.
these things to make it sound like they are socially responsible, but apologies are just words, and I gotta say this, in my culture we don't have this notion of forgiveness. We really don't, and I say that because if you did something that had an adverse effect on somebody, but it was an accident, then you take the actions to make the harm right. If you do it intentionally, I don't know how you forgive somebody for doing something intentional. Because
Yeah,
what's the
you can.
likelihood that you're never going to do it again? I mean, if you've already shown, look, I say this. I know that there's been a lot, well, not a lot, not enough, but it's like dropping 2 atomic bombs in Japan. Oh yeah, the United States can say, "Oh yeah, these atomic weapons, these nuclear weapons are terrible things, and we got to do everything we can do to control, if they're ever used again." But they're the only country in the world that ever dropped nuclear weapons especially on a civilian population. So yeah, you can express remorse, and I will say that there's no question the United States, spent a lot of money trying to make that terrible atrocity right, but they haven't done it elsewhere. And they certainly haven't done it, to Native people. So, Jacob, I appreciate you listening. Hope you listen again, and I hope you join in and call again and spread the word. If you caught us by accident, well, then hopefully you'll catch us intentionally the next time. I do put the shows up as a
99.5
podcast,
FM.
and you can find us every week on WBAI in New York City and on WPFW in Washington D.C. It was great to hear somebody just kind of catching us, on a whim. So that's awesome. We probably got time.
One more caller.
All right, we'll try to do one more caller real quick. Caller, you're
Yeah, real
up
quick.
next, and you're up last. So what's your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, John, your buddy David from Michigan.
All right, Dave.
Doing
I'm glad you're able to get through. How you doing?
Oh, I'm a little fired up. You tend to do that to me. So I got one comment, one suggestion.
Okay, go ahead.
Apologizing without action, like you're saying, it's just you're being a predator while you do it. You're just being the ultimate snarkiness.
It's almost insulting, right? I mean, I find it
Pointless.
insulting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's sadistic. So, and they know that intentionally within the law structure, it's very subjective and full of all kinds of bias, like you've been highlighting. So my suggestion would be hit them where it hurts. If a judge has a good morning or a bad morning with his spouse, right, maybe it leads to a little more morality coming into play, a little more open-mindedness and compassion.
Yeah.
So I think we need to find a way to resonate with the people who are taking the decisions, right? And sometimes the best way is through their own wallet and their own heart, which seems to be lacking. So I'm basically saying between the lines, how do we reach the people who do have compassion, who do have a awareness and relationship with life here, right? We don't need things like morality and rules if we understand that. So I just think it's food for thought. How do we start to resonate better with the lawmakers and the enforcers? So.
Well, and I appreciate the call, and that's why I spend so much time talking about the holes that exist in the legal doctrines they use against us. I mean, I'm not a big Sam Alito fan, but when I find stuff that he's written and he said that make my argument for me, I'm gonna and why he did it, I don't even know. I don't even care. But the fact is that these become a matter of public record. So yeah, I agree with you. I think we need to take every opportunity to maybe we grind some of these apologies back in their faces. Hawaii tried to do it, and I think Hawaii still. I mean, there are people who are still strong advocates of the Hawaiian Kingdom that still are pushing back. I mean, that apology came in 1993. So no, I agree with you,
Using
David.
the
I
apology
think
as receipts.
yeah, exactly. I want to thank you. I want to thank you, caller, for joining the show. We'll be back here next week doing it all over again. I like I said, spread the word, support the station, support WBAI, support WPFW, and support Resistance Radio. We're gonna stay at it. We're gonna keep bringing you news you'll get nowhere else. That's what I do. I'm John Kane. This is Resistance Radio. Yahweh.